Wonderful, thank you, and thanks Robin and Sian for your introductions, and everybody on putting not just this session but this series together over the past few days. So Sian gave a little bit of background about where I'm from, based in the UK, working with Wellcome Gates and the African Academy of Sciences on the Good Clinical Trials Collaborative. So it's kicked off in March this year, and as I joined, I didn't think that clinical trials were going to be quite so high profile in this pandemic context, but certainly the issues that we're looking to tackle are certainly being discussed in the public domain more significantly. In many senses, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Certainly it gives us the platform to have this type of discussion. But I think we live in an opinionated world, and there may be some challenges for us to work through there. I'm going to see if I can throw up these slides now just to work through. Yeah, hopefully that's get in there.
Yep.
Great. So just giving you a very short amount of detail on what we're doing, what we're about, what our focus is. But really what I wanted to do more fundamentally is throw in a couple of conceptual questions about our work and the assumptions and power dynamics that we're dealing with, that I think we can have a really useful conversation about today. But yeah, just a bit of that background and who we are. What we're looking at is guidance around good clinical practice. So in essence, the rules and regulations around designing clinical trials. We're looking exclusively at randomized clinical trials and challenging some of the issues there are around defensive practice and over-interpretation and a risk appetite so low as to be creating barriers to high quality research in a variety of settings. So the aim of our work over the next year or so is to develop more rational, proportionate guidelines that support all types of randomized clinical research, whatever the setting and whatever the intervention type. So just running through why we think that's important. Essentially, there are huge missed opportunities in health by virtue of research not being able to happen successfully, or indeed research being uncollaborative, and therefore certain trials being too small or indeed too complex to generate high quality evidence at the end. So we see these benefits of creating better guidance for clinical trials as producing more reliable results. So whether that's fewer trials or just more, the same amount or more, the trial quality is the important factor. So that we're not seeing so many. COVID is a great example where we're actually seeing quite a big difference between treatment trials and vaccine trials. Treatment trials, there are thousands out there, and the vast majority are not producing results which are enabling good quality, robust decision or policy informing results. And actually, in that sense, the participants who take part in those trials are being given essentially quite a raw deal, that they're being exposed to experimental products with no benefit to overall knowledge generation in the end. So that goal of large-scale collaboration, particularly around treatments, is something which we feel can be addressed with this work. I think, again, fostering innovation here as this last item on the benefits is that actually if we think more carefully about how we use our resources in clinical trials and how we utilize the generosity of participants in taking part in clinical research, we can move faster while still looking at the fundamental elements of protecting participants and protecting the results that the clinical trials generate. So I said I just wanted to give a quick overview on that, and there's clearly a lot more technical detail about what we're doing and the process we have behind it. But I thought that these are some of the big challenges that we're going to run into. I think if we talk about these words, I'll jump to the second one actually. If we talk about generating rational, proportionate, adequate, and appropriate guidance, the question is, in whose eyes, from what perspective? And actually it's linked to that first question really there. If we are trusting, if we're creating a system where regulation is not as intensive and is not as, it does not pursue every small detail and clearly only tries to focus on issues that matter, challenges that matter, and perhaps errors that matter. Who are we allowing to make those judgments? I think that's probably a really important question for the participant community and the public around how we engage with this work. We have a large-scale program of consultation around the guidance that we're producing, and we'll need to keep ensuring that we're creating opportunities for this question to be scrutinised by the public and by potential participants. I think a second question here, and there's a lot more to talk on that subject. Hopefully I've laid it out in a way which you can understand where I'm coming from. The second part is actually there are the vast numbers of trials which look after their participants very well, and the regulation that sits around conducting a clinical trial means that the participants' individual well-being is protected in one sense. I guess the question is that I want to address is if a trial by its design is going to be uninformative in the future, then, as I mentioned a little bit before in this talk, is that an ethical use of a participant's time if they're not going to, if it doesn't generate reliable results? Just quickly and more or less finally, connecting that to, again, what we've seen with COVID, seeing it more recently with very high-profile politicians indeed, that treatments that are unproven are being used as standard of care, and that does not come with the same degree of regulation, not the same consenting process. It comes down to individual physicians or medical teams' judgments. And actually, it seems odd that as you move into a clinical trial, where all of that behaviour in routine practice can go reasonably unchecked, there is an enormous amount more scrutiny and regulation over the introduction of that type of experimental intervention. So I think rebalancing the perceptions around using experimental treatments in routine care and the importance of generating good quality evidence in robust, well-designed clinical trials is something I think is really interesting to get a public and participant perspective on. Essentially, does that matter? I just very, very briefly, we don't need to go into these slides, but I think over the programme of our work, we will be engaging broadly across a whole range of stakeholders. You can imagine from the scope that I'm talking about that we're talking about all partners within clinical trials, and particularly and first on this list here, the participants and patients and the public that engage with them. And actually, for us, the way we want to approach this is from a grassroots perspective. So we're getting the trialist and participant perspectives and leading towards that public health benefit in the end. Those others in the middle there are fundamental partners, but we need to start with those who are dealing with this on a very practical level. I think this is my final slide. We can draft beautiful, proportionate, accessible guidance. It doesn't make a difference unless the regulators, the funders, and health systems are utilising it in the way that we intended. So again, this is a long process which will take a lot of advocacy to generate the impact we want to see. And I think I probably ran over there, didn't I? So sorry about that, but thank you. That's everything I wanted to prime us with.